Hi guys, welcome back to another exciting episode of the show, Control or Be Controlled, the podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Today's guest is David Alan Brown, author, speaker, leadership consultant, and teacher who has spent more than 3 decades helping people discover greater authenticity, purpose, and personal empowerment. David's work sits at the intersection of psychology, spirituality, leadership, and self discovery. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's get into the show. You have shared that there was a season when your life became incredibly dark. What was happening then, and what ultimately became the turning point towards hope?
Well, I think that some of what might resonate with your listeners is that there was no like specific incident. This was something that occurred to me over, a long time of just patterns and habits and getting stuck in places that are very common for many people. And I think when we talk about self mastery, we can and will. I'll answer your question about what are those turning points? Where's that moment that really makes the difference? And we all have to find that. And I was a stay-at-home dad for a long time. I was raising family. I had children who had specific high needs. My relationship with my wife was not strong or supportive or a true partnership. I had set aside a lot of my own, not just career goals, but sort of sense of who I was as a person, what I wanted to accomplish as a human being that I had known from a young age. I was denying certain things about what I wanted and what I needed, and in fact, I had sort of gotten into a very destructive habit of claiming I didn't need or want anything. So I was sort of constantly denying my own self, and that's a huge part of what I think your listeners are curious about is that for me, I think the thing that finally did it was COVID here in the United States and how difficult that was for all of us to interrupt our lives, to not know really what our purpose was or what was coming next. I was a caretaker, but my family really was just striving to be and survive on their own. And so I was left fairly I don't know, fairly directionless. And like I say, after years and years of all of this combining, I remember distinctly that at that point I started to have um, serious thoughts about self harm. And for me, depression wasn't sadness. It was, I got into a place of numbness, of not feeling anything, where, I was absolutely being just controlled by pattern and habit and just stuck. And then that turns to despair, I think, when we turn to ourselves, and your listeners may have experienced this, and we want to feel different. It doesn't feel good. We know there's more. We sense there's opportunity, that there's meaning, that there's purpose. But when you ask yourself, or someone asks you, okay, so what would make it better? And then you don't know the answer. There doesn't seem to be anything that could make it better. That's when despair sets in and things get much more difficult. The shifting point for me, to answer the rest of your question, though, I think, well, was that was an awakening, and with children especially, I knew that wasn't something that I wanted to accomplish, and so I turned to professional help. And I had been in therapies before. I had been with therapists, some of whom I now know were not any good. So step one was finding a good therapist. And step two was deciding that I would no longer withhold anything or lie about anything uh, or avoid anything. That I would let the professional do their work, and I would be fully invested in it, for myself. And that level of honesty and authenticity, that really exploring self and being willing to go all the way into the truth of what is happening and what we're feeling and what's going on, that became the start of change.
All right, thank you so much. David, many people struggle with self criticism, fear, or overthinking. How can someone begin responding to those inner voices instead of being controlled by them?
Yeah, it's such a great place to start because when I talk to people about this program and about the self talk and self awareness, so often that's what I hear is, well, my voices are angry or my voices are mean, my inner voice, is unkind, and I recognize that. I know that that's true, and there's a couple of things to remember. That the first and foremost is um, that thoughts are just thoughts. I just heard Deepak Chopra talking about this the other day. Just spend time when a thought comes into your head, that no matter where it comes from, whether it seems like it's inner voice or it's just something random, just take a moment and try thinking of it as something completely separate from yourself. Just examine it as if you were walking by a table and there was a lamp there or fruit. Like, oh, that's an interesting thought. Oh, I wonder how that got there. Ask yourselves some very subjective questions that aren't about the content. Just think of it as a thing, as an object, because that's truly what it is. Thoughts come into our heads and they're not who we are. They aren't always our motivation. They aren't always what's best for us or correct. They don't always feel good. Sometimes, frankly, they're just scary, from the guy who drove around town thinking maybe he should kill himself. Sometimes the thoughts are scary and they're just thoughts. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. These are not the definition of you. They are not the core of your substance. They are merely thoughts. The second thing, as far as the voices are concerned, Darlington, is some people want to say, yeah, but I want to find the good voices. I want to find the ones and the thing is that these are the voices. Like, these are the ones. There aren't different ones. There aren't, we're not going to shut this one up because he's being, the voices are, this is what we're working with. And at first, we do probably have to recognize that if we haven't embraced our emotional side or appreciated all of the work that we've done, those voices might feel neglected. They might feel disappointed. They might feel upset. They might be angry. They might be hurt, not necessarily even because of something that we have done. It could be because of a trauma in our life or just our circumstances up till now. So really the first thing that the additional thing that we do is, as we set the thoughts aside, like in the first part of my answer, the second thing we do is we make certain that we're loving ourselves no matter what. That like we embrace that child within us. When a toddler, it's something happens to them and they lash out at us or they say something or they cry, then we immediately know that, oh, that's just who they are, and that they're just responding to something, and we love them. It'll be okay. Well, we have to start doing that for ourselves too. Oh, look, that part of me is angry or frustrated or responding to something, and it's not how I necessarily want to feel right now, but I love them, and it'll be okay. So it's those two things, separating thoughts from ourselves and then embracing and loving the self. These are the first introductory steps to moving through this cycle of negativity, which is very, very real for many people, including myself.
All right, so many people assume spirituality alone should solve every problem. Why do you believe true transformation requires integrating emotional, intellectual, and spiritual awareness?
Can you repeat that question for me?
I
Just
said,
the last part.
how can someone begin responding to those? Okay, okay. Many people assume spirituality alone should solve every problem. Why do you believe true transformation requires integrating emotional, intellectual, and spiritual awareness?
Okay, yeah, I think that, and let's just start with a couple of terms here because I have talked about higher power and spirituality and how people experience that in their lives or define it or practice it is entirely up to them. Sometimes different faiths or churches or practices can put forth what you said at the start, the sense that, oh, just leave it all up to a higher power, it will be fine. And you're right. I don't. That's not how I perceive the energy dynamics in which we live. It's not how I perceive an integration of higher power into our lives. And here's why. When the program is designed to find a balance between those three elements that you talked about, our emotional side, and my understanding of this comes from study and recognition that we're a living organism, that has evolved over millennia to be exactly what it is. That's extraordinarily complex. It's an amazing uh, entity. There are massive amounts of information being poured into it at any given time. It has a data center called a brain that we call a brain that processes huge bits of information and responds with to all of that information with primarily chemical and electrochemical responses. That's all in a very organic thing that happens and would happen whether or not there's a God or not, because this is how we function. And so to ignore the beauty of emotion, for example, which exists to help us respond, to know, to have a not just a survival, but an instinctual movement towards life and purpose. At the same time, we've also obviously been provided with free will. This massive mechanism also gives us a consciousness that we wake up to each day and can honestly say the thought, what will I do today? We have, and this is the fundamental uh, concept of your program, we have the ability to choose virtually everything that we do, with the exception of the most fundamental physiological portions of being alive. But if we choose not to do those, then we're not alive anymore. So that exists, the things we do is obviously a huge part of our existence on Earth. How we choose, what direction we take, how what where we want to put our energy, where we want to invest our emotions and our talents and our skills. So to sort of set those aside, and I have seen people do it. And when I do ministry work, we call it spiritual bypassing, which is essentially those two things I just described are hard. They're hard work. They take a lot of energy and time and they distract us. Sometimes we're very, very uncomfortable. And whether that's emotionally uncomfortable or with actions uncomfortable because we're doing things that are hard. So sometimes I've seen people say, I don't have to do any of that. I don't have to grieve. I don't have to, do good work. I can choose work that just makes me rich, but that doesn't have any meaning. I can settle into routine because I don't want to be afraid anymore. Okay, great. And in the end, yeah, but what about injustice? What about the people near you who need you? What about those you've chosen to support or to bring into this world at the very least? What about God will take care. Oh, it's something bigger to take care. It's a complete, in my opinion, abdication of responsibility. And so, why else would we be here if it weren't to combine this instinctual self and this action self? Okay, that's the next question, because why else would we be here? Well, we would be here not to be controlled or directed by or to defer to a bigger purpose, a higher power, a greater energy, however you want to say, but in fact, to integrate what is greater than ourselves, to take something that is spectacular, that has the infinite knowledge, that has an unconditional and unlimited well of love, that is about the things that make us our greatest selves: harmony, peace, justice, service, care, love. Those are the things. That's how we define higher power, no matter what religion we're using. And so, of course, so what we're here to do then is to integrate that into life. What else would it be? Would it be just to sit as a blob and be an emotional, constantly responding, the term in America is lizard brain, where we're just only in our emotions, instinctual selves? Would it be to just take action and amass wealth and just to, get bigger and more and grow? And surely these are not the things that life is intended to be. Life is intended to be the integration of something much greater. And the thing that will integrate it, along with plants and nature and anything else that's living, but the fundamental and most powerful thing on this planet that will integrate these these um, these values, these virtues, are human beings. And so that's why we do it. That's why we undertake it.
All right, thank you so much. So, if there's one thing you leave listeners with, what would that be?
Just one thing that, well, like, where do I think people should start?
Yes.
Hmm. I think that's really great. And I think I'll tell you where I've been um, lately, and that is from a place of gratitude. I think that there's two powerful things about gratitude. One is that when we're struggling with ourselves, when we're when those voices are not as kind or as friendly, and we're just not sure what to do, what should I do next? Then one of the greatest phrases, one of the simplest things, the power of gratitude, is live your life in such a way that you see gratitude in the faces of others. And simple gestures are enough. Just random acts of kindness, just seeing a need and fulfilling it. And then not just looking away or scurrying off, but, looking in the face of the person and seeing gratitude isn't that will alter your life. That will change your life. The other thing that gratitude does is it puts us back in connection with the divine. And this is an exercise that I've done for years, and it's a true story. And your listeners can do it right now, right along with me. I'll tell you a bit of the story, and then we'll go from there. I went to school in New York City, and every day on the way to classes, I would be asked for money because there were people in need. And one day, and I couldn't afford to, or to give money every day or to everyone, and so you have to make decisions about that. And one day I was coming home from class. I remember it quite distinctly. And again, someone asked me for money, and I walked right by, and I just did this. I don't even know how it came to me, but I started to add up in dollars in America the value of everything that was on my person. And people, again, listening, Dorothy, you could do this right now. But just start with whatever you have on, whatever clothes you're wearing, whether you purchased them or not. I mean, what's the dollar value of what I had on me at that very moment walking through the park that day? And so I did that, and I made it, and then I realized I had on a new coat that I'd gotten for Christmas that year that was actually quite fine. And so suddenly I'm in the hundreds of dollars, and that's just my clothing. And then I had a backpack over my shoulder and books, etc. And this was before the days as people at home are doing this. Start with your shoes and your whatever you're wearing clothes wise. And and then don't forget if you have any jewelry on, what the value of that might be, or a watch, or anything that you're carrying. What if you're wearing? I'm wearing glasses right now. The value of these glasses, or if you have contact lenses, or. And then of course, what I first had to say, that was before we were all carrying tiny computers in our pockets. And so, what's the hundreds of dollars value of the equipment that you're sitting in front of? And when you have a figure at any time, and you can do this over and over in your life, when you have that number, how much, and then you begin to think about how much that money, if I had taken the amount of money that I was literally wearing on my person and given it to this person who had asked for money instead of just a dollar or some change, it would be all virtually life altering. And there are people all around the world for whom what you have access to right now could change the status of their lives. There are, in fact, on all over the place, there are things they're called micro lenders, and you can invest in them. I can go to a website and offer $500, $300, $100 to someone for whom that would make a huge difference. And there are wonderful stories of vendors, for example, who were able to purchase something as simple as a bicycle, but the being able to ride the bicycle to the next town instead of having to walk in order to get their supplies or their inventory transformed how they did business and made a massive difference in their lives for something as simple as that. So there's two things. One, of course, is the call to help others. But what the gratitude does for us is it grounds us in the solidity of knowing that things are okay, that I'm safe. It takes away the doubt or the fear sometimes that these unkept voices are offering us. It inspires us to know that we have choices, and sometimes just knowing you have a choice is a strong a reclaiming of who we are in that one circle that I was talking about. Just remembering we have choices can open us back up to divine inspiration and emotional clarity. So I would say today my answer, and I have different answers different days, but I would say today my answer is gratitude, Darth.
All right, David, thank you for sharing your journey, your thoughtful approach to helping people better understand themselves and live with greater intention. So I really appreciate you for coming to the show. And thank you for sharing your experience and your insight with me and my audience.
It's been my pleasure.